Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. This is an episode that's part of our FII coverage series, and I have Zahin Razeen on the line, who he's founder and CEO over at Hydrocoal Plus. First off, Zahin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. A pleasure to be here.
All right, Zahin. So correct me if I'm wrong here. I think you were at the Miami FII. Is that
Yeah,
right? I know we didn't cross paths, but it was a good thing I could get you booked on the interview. But you were in Miami, right?
yeah, I was there. This was my second time in Miami, so second FII. Always a pleasure to be there.
Now, how
Yeah.
did you originally get introduced to the organization?
Right. So it was a very funny story. I was onboarding a flight to New York for the UNGA summit, if you will. And then I happened to get an email saying that they're really interested to have me speak on the plenary of at FII for the future of humanity. I was like, okay, maybe it's one of those spam emails. So, you get a lot of those.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I didn't look much into it. Then I land again, then I see all the list of events and everything that it entails, what FII constitutes fundamentally, what their mission is. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. This is like, I'm sure I was pinching myself. I was like, okay, I'm sure this is real, right? And then I talked to Paloma, who happens to be a dear friend, who was the one who basically found me from my UN duties and basically put me forward at the FII panel. And yeah, I was at the closing plenary session with His Excellency Mohammed Al Abbar, who
Mm.
built Burj Khalifa, if you will, and then he hosted like a series of founders and technologists, social workers, or what have you, in a session that would seem to kind of, I would say, bring in a lot of audience,
Mm.
and I've been working with them on a pro bono basis, obviously, like to be a good steward of FII, given that what it entails, what it stands up for, and to bring in everyone together. I've recently published a paper with them on my work, so that's always great. And yeah, so I'm always with FII across the board. Whatever I see in FII, I'm never gonna miss it because it's all the surprises that come with it, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you've been in Miami.
Let's get into the paper a bit. So, revolutionizing water safety. So, maybe talk a little bit more about the reasoning behind this and what took place.
Right, absolutely. So it was kind of built on my plenary session, which was in 2023, and then about my work, which is to work at the intersection of energy and water security. So, and why is it so important to me? Water security or water safety. I grew up in Bangladesh. It's a country of 180 million people. It was part of the biggest mass poisoning in human history back in 2002 due to arsenic seeping into the groundwater. So it basically contaminated 90% of the population.
Wow.
So you can imagine it could have been easily prevented if they had surveillance technology to just preemptively provide diagnostics. So straight out of university, I was studying at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. You can call me the child of the UN. And my research paper was on epidemiology. And I started working with what happens to be the world's largest public water utility, catering to 30 million people, supplying water to them on a daily basis, dispensing 90 billion liters annually. So imagine if there's a small cholera outbreak, what happens? It crumbles the entire network and as well as the residential users. So the technology was basically it would look into biochemical or biophysical parameters or any threshold breaches in real time, provide prognostication to the plant operators, the treatment plant managers, as well as network maintenance engineers, so that they could be augmented with the insights to proactively solve any kind of pertinent threshold breaches, right? So this ultimately translated to a full-scale project to then what became a full-time company. And based on the 5 billion data points, I felt that since it's a universal application that we're undertaking, so I'm also Caribbean and American as well. So in that sense, I have so many stories to tell. So bringing three different, I would say, cultures together and having that manifest in a paper, it would be great. So it seems to gain a lot of traction, and it's a technology that will hopefully create a lot of impact and
Mm.
also prevent a lot of future outbreaks. So I'm really grateful to FII for what all that they do and the platform that they provide across the board.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's the wee story of a small startup endeavor that led to where it is today. So yeah.
When you're putting together this white paper and you finally get to the end, I know whenever, writing or researching anything, I mean, is there anything that surprised you, like as you were going through and creating this?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on the journey. I'm a Gen Z at the end of the day. It was a university startup and a project that translated to now what national agencies across the world are using it to protect safeguard their water network and,
Wow.
and its residential users, right? So to see through the process of just having a tunnel vision to solve, I would say, a very complex problem with, I would say, an obsessive, I would say, force, and then to see that manifest from a product, from an idea, from a lab research to a product to then ultimately a commercial use was something truly magnificent. And now to see that now it's being scaled up from
Mm.
across the board, across the regions. So it was quite, I would say, like Jeff Bezos says, it's just day one. So there's more to be done. And hopefully this is a means to an end to something that would be a greater outcome ultimately. And it kind of intertwined with my mission and ethos is to complete, yeah, to safeguard water and ensure energy sufficiencies across the world, if you will, using
Mm.
technology.
Talk a little bit more, speaking of the scaling up, talk a little bit more about where you're at with HydroQuo Plus today. So you mentioned, starting university, then coming up with the concept, now scaling up. Talk about where you're at today.
Right. So think of us as a mini Palantir, our Anduril for water and energy, right? So we're mostly working with government agencies, water utilities, some of the biggest water utilities in Asia, Middle East, what have you. And ideally, we're trying to solve complex, I would say, network problems from, let's say, an application interface all the way to a physical problem that constitutes solving the problem, I would say, at the forefront. So if you look at energy infrastructures or a water treatment plant infrastructure, they're mission critical infrastructures, and they need preemptive protocols to be able to constantly mitigate any kind of anomalies, critical failures that would directly impact any area or population surrounding it. So
Mm.
what we're trying to do is provide software interfaced with a co-pilot, which I'm sure everybody's aware of at this point, and augment operators and empower them with insights to mitigate any kind of infrastructural challenges that would, again, impact a lot of people and places and cities in real time. In
Mm.
doing so, they're able to reduce OPEX, reduce CAPEX, and use intelligence as a way to kind of constantly get ahead of their schedules of whatever that's required. So creating that symbiosis, right? And that would be some of the themes we'd talk about today. It's transhumanism, co-intelligence,
Hmm.
how would be the future of the next stages of, I would say, whatever we're doing, all related to AI.
Yeah.
And most of the things that are being talked about are large language models, they're being commoditized, but on a very, I would say, superficial level, superfluous level, but can be used for mission critical things and
Mm.
made available at a cost effective way. So that's kind of the idea. And so that's where we're at.
Mm.
We're working with some of, again, like I said, some of the largest national agencies. So this gives us critical bandwidth to continuously innovate and provide them with products that really empower cities, nations, and places, if you will.
Mm. For you, what does that look like? So transhumanism in Asia, let's just say for good. Like, what does that look like for you?
Right. So you have to kind of always, first principles, we're talking about first principles, but can we talk about the infinitesimal nature of, I would say, the world, right? Where does it all begin from? And if you, then only can you then hyperfixate on the future, right? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So there are a few things and principles or working mechanisms that I leverage. I'm sure you're aware of the Kardashev scale.
Mm.
It talks about type 1, type 3, and advanced civilizations, and the maximum net disposable energy that one planetary system would be able to, let's say, leverage to expand a particular actionable continuity. So currently, where we are in the grand scheme of things, we're at a lowly hanging type 0 civilization. We're able to kind of harvest energy from Earth living beings, creatures, and then use that as an energy from potential to kinetic energy to kind of continue to do about our daily activities. We've still yet to transfer energy from a different exoplanet, right?
Hmm.
So within that realm, what can we do to hyperscale, hyper accelerate I would say, advent of a type 0 civilization? What are the technologies that can interface within the civilization that is trying to reach that point? And could we humanize that to the point where we would organically transition to that point of type 0 civilization? So AI is that kind of assistive tooling, if you will, to kind of act as an extension to what would be a type 0 civilization. So transferring energy from, let's say, one planet to another planet, which obviously SpaceX is trying to do. The Starship is trying to go to Mars and set up a different bases, but that would again be scratching the surface. So when you
Hmm.
look at that long-term horizon, you're only then able to understand and kind of visualize how and what you can be doing to do it. So the three fundamental things become very important. That's energy, food, and water security. And most of these technologies that are being used to commoditize, let's say, commercial applications, are not being used to make breakthroughs in these fields to make sure that it becomes a sustenance that is fully cyclic by nature to the point where it does not become a finite energy attribute, rather it becomes
Mm,
an energy attribute so that type zero civilization can manifest. But if you were to then kind of apply that as a Kardashev scale and see where do we stand in this kind of micro scale of Kardashev civilizations, if you will. I'm sure you've kind of come across Ray Kurzweil. He wrote the book, he co-authored, and kind of familiar ourselves with, singularity.
mm-hmm,
Singularity is a kind of coined from mathematics, where anything that is divided by zero leads to singularity, or when energy collapses to a stateless state, if you will,
mm-hmm,
where it condenses to a point of divergence, right? So that's where you look into a Dyson sphere or a black hole, if you will, or event horizon. But in a human singularity, we are in there's six stages, right? So thousands of years ago, we derived from a nucleus due to this expanding supernuclear force that we have that continuously takes out proton electrons across out of the nucleus. That expansionist force allowed us to continue to evolve to, let's say, from that, epoch
mm-hmm,
stage one to epoch stage two, which is what led to the chemistry and physics to combine and lead to the creation of carbon atoms. Carbons were obviously very fundamentally useful because now it would create a case for evolutionary biology to take place. So then we had the Cambrian explosion, where I would say, the organisms started interacting, right? And then we went to stage four of the civilization, where now intelligence is being used, and it was able to evolve only because we had a dexterous, I would say, limbs and thumbs, and fingers, which was one of the primary reasons why we were able to transliterate and extend our conscious stream through communicating complex problems in a rote format, or in general, just in a which way, using linguistics as a way, like I'm doing right now,
mm-hmm,
to kind of transcend. Stage five is where singularity kind of converges, right? And that's where we're almost at that kind of inflection tipping point, if you will.
mm-hmm,
So ideally, whatever may be the case, but what I'm trying to do, or what Hydroco is fundamentally trying to do, to create those conditions so that we can take that transcendental step to stage five of the life of the epoch of the stages five, where we can then create a co-intelligence so that consciousness can expand at a more, I would say, high rate. And that is through interfacing technologies and solving complex problems
mm,
in, I would say, fields that are usually not looked into. And then making that humanized to the point where it can be used to solve massive problems. And so using software technology, hardware technology, and then, the assistive AI that we have nowadays to kind of create that cohesive element to then, create that extension of a human extension, if you will. So that's kind of
mm.
a fundamental, that kind of mechanism, how I think, and how we're trying to kind of converge that and kind of push this into a philosophy for using AI for social good, if you will.
Yeah. Zahin, this has been really enlightening today. I'm having you on and also learning more about the work that you're doing at HydroQuo Plus. That being said, only so much we can get done in a, 20, 25-minute podcast interview. So I know people that are listening that want to continue to follow your work, your company, your impact. How do people connect? How do they follow up? How do they learn more?
I'm just an email away. So it's Razeen at hydroco.com. And, just the website's there. One click, and you'd be able to see what some of the things that we're working on, exciting projects that we're doing.
Mm.
And I would love to create synergies, if you will. So, yeah, absolutely looking forward to that.
Wonderful. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put the links in the show notes. So you could just click on the link and head right on over. And speaking in the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Zahin, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam. Cheers.